Thank you for joining us, everyone, and thank you to our presenters. Suzanne, if you want to take it away, I'll stop screen share.
I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen, everyone? Okay, good. All right, can you hear me? Good. All right. So I knew at the beginning of this that the key to keeping these students engaged was really going to be the level of interactivity. What kind of energy could I infuse into this class to keep people, number one, from napping during class, and two, to work actively with, I always split my classes up into teams, to work actively with their team members and to be able to contribute to the class in a way that I always tell my students we're all facilitators of teaching and learning. So breakout rooms, of course, are key. Breakout rooms are key, and I focus completely on, all right, what is the content for the day? And what are the challenges in the content for the day? What are the stumbling blocks? What do students have the most questions? What content presents the biggest mystery to them? What's clear, what's not? And I have them explore different challenges that I create for them, and they explore it not only individually, sometimes individually, but usually working as a team. And that's why my breakout rooms are so important. My classes are very active with in a breakout room environment. Hold on, I'm sorry. Let me go. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, the success of my classes, how involved and how embedded are these students within the class environment so that they are staying focused and learning the concepts that we are covering during that class. So the challenge that I had with Cathy earlier was pre-setting up break rooms. When you have large classes, to set up break rooms on the fly for each class is not doable. Not if you have large classes. And that was my challenge, which I solved today. And then in the breakout rooms, I go over the content of my classes before each class, and I determine, all right, in our breakout rooms, what are going to be the challenges? How much time do they need? And what kind of response do I want from them? Because they will come back to class and present the responses. Each team meets together in the breakout rooms. The breakout rooms are totally team-based, not individual. So they work with their team members on the challenges that I give them, and then they come back and each team reports back to the class. Okay, so I set up the breakout rooms in advance, and I know that that's a great challenge, the pre-setting up of breakout rooms to many of the professors from what I understand. So it's good to be able to solve that mystery. And then I set up the breakout rooms in teams prior to my semester. And then the teams work together on several things during the semester, not only class content during the class, but they have 2 or 3 projects during the semester to work on as a team. And then, of course, they present that during class as well. So the semester goes going back and forth from breakout room presentations to project presentations. Okay. And then, of course, during class, I usually lecture for about 15 minutes. Then I present a challenge to the teams. I give them either 5 or 10 minutes to address the challenge with their team members, and then they move out of the breakout rooms back to class, and they present to the entire class the solutions that they have created. And then if there is a Q&A that is appropriate for that particular challenge, if I anticipate that the students are going to have some questions about the content, I will leave time for a Q&A. The biggest challenge, of course, in these classes, we only have a certain amount of time, and I have to balance it very carefully to be able to cover all the content in that class, plus provide the level of interactivity that will add to the student energy and learning process during class time. Okay. I also present, which I have done in my face-to-face classes as well, I have audio-visual content for many of the concepts in my class. I usually begin the class, if I have an audio-visual, let's say a video clip, I present that at the beginning of the class. And these the particular videos that I have that cover my content are very engaging. And then I pose one challenging question at the end of that video, put them in the breakout rooms, have them work on the challenge, and then come back. So it's not only class content, it is class content vis-a-vis the videos that I show at the beginning of several of the classes during this semester. And I find they really, really do a great job with that. All right. And then, of course, I use Blackboard in my classes to post all their projects, even the projects that they present during class. These are posted in Blackboard. Their exam responses, of course, are posted. There's a great deal of discussion and communication that goes on in my Blackboard discussion forum, the area of forum and discussion in Blackboard. And then, of course, the students communicate with me frequently in issues that will come up during the semester. So again, I'll go back to my original decision in the beginning of, if this was going to be successful, if they were going to learn actively. And I set up the environment as active, as interactive, and as interesting, which is the responsibility of all professors, I believe, to make these classes as interesting and engaging as we can, so that the students will want to be part of this and they will want to engage as actively as they do. And of course, I try to elicit responses from the students on their level of interest in the way that we are approaching our content. And fortunately, that feedback has been most positive. Does anyone have any questions? I did want to overdo my 10 minutes, Hamad.
That's totally okay. And if folks have questions they come up with later on, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A session. You can come back to that. But thank you, Suzanne, very much for your presentation. Amitai Touval from the marketing department is next.
Yeah, so thank you for starting us off. And in a way, like, I'm building on the previous ideas here. So you'll see some repetition. I want to thank also the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Bernard L. Schwartz Communication Institute, because they really kind of help shape some of my teaching ideas. And of course, I'm responsible ultimately for what I do in class, but they really helped me think through some of the teaching methodologies. There are many forces that negate engagement. I mean, napping is one of them, which is very true from previous speaker. There are like living situations, bad Wi-Fi. Some people juggle more than one Zoom call because they kind of get credentials for being in one Zoom call on one device, and then they're also engaged on another Zoom call. And there are many smartphone distractions like news alerts, email messages. So we are fighting with a lot of potential, distractions. And also there is another force that can negate engagement, which is like Zoom-induced social anxiety, where all participants are somehow equally close to your face. All of them at once show up in your private space. And for some people, it means that they navigate away from that. They shut the windows down, certain windows down, and they kind of trying to manage their Zoom-induced anxiety. What I try to do, try to prevent students from zooming out. I tell them right in the start of class that there'll be something coming up, either a poll, a breakout room, or chat question. So they'll be on alert. So they won't be like logging in and then saying, okay, let me go on the other Zoom call or go to the bathroom or make some cup of tea. He'll be droning for the next 15 minutes. And while the professor is droning, I can really do something important. So I try to tell them, no, in the next 5 minutes, something really crucial will happen, and I want your engagement and your attention in the next 5 minutes. And so sometimes I'll take them, let's say, to a breakout room, right? I do usually 2 breakout rooms per session. And then when they come back, I ask all students to write a summary of what they talked about. And I have a list of participants who were in the breakout rooms on my screen. I don't close it off. So when I see the chats, I also ask other people to participate who are there, but maybe didn't put stuff on chat. And invariably, I'll read the names of whoever was. Like usually breakout rooms are 4 or 5 participants. So I'll say, okay, Nali will talk, but then she was with, and then I'll mention the other names of the team members. So there's a sense of like anticipation, participation, that there is some kind of sense of rapport. So I try to bring them out by just calling their names. I think is very important. If you mention people's names, they feel like that connection, some level of connection. There's some level of interaction every 2 or 3 slides. So I try to create some sort of conversation, mini conversations about concepts, applications or examples. Maybe I'll show a YouTube and then get people reaction on chat. And some stuff that's also I'm learning, as I'm teaching, I'm also learning new things. So I'll bring in like, something quick to talk about. It can be like 1819 corporations get some of the rights attributed to people. So we have John Marshall, and then the ongoing 200-year debate about whether corporations are people. So you can bring that in, depend on the class context and what you're teaching, because we're not just teaching them to be useful in a technocratic society where we are teaching them to be part of a democracy where they're talking about ideas more generally. So one example from my actually communication class, I'm teaching also in the communication department this semester, we had some conversation about social responsibility, philanthropy. So I laid out some ideas from the textbook, and then I send them to breakout rooms and put the icons of the group projects they're working on down below. So they're working on DoSomething.org, their Wildlife Conservation Society, Snapchat, Jurgens, Target. So they're working on those groups. So during the breakout rooms, I hope that they will be also contributing content to their group project, something that was emphasized by the previous speaker today. So the idea is, again, as she said, leverage the group project to create engagement. When the reading assignments align with assignment templates, that really works well. You see, like sometimes the textbook will actually be the perfect template for the group project, or the group project will really work well with the lecture material. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if it does, if there's a way to make it work, then it's really, really powerful because the students are engaged in content that they can later use in their writing assignments, their project. And during class, contributions to chat is important. One can almost quantify that, how many times people contribute to chat. Verbal participation is important, but attendance is not participation. And I emphasize that to my students. So there's a Blackboard forum dedicated to each Zoom session that when students don't show up to Zoom, they can still participate and still be part of that. So that's very important. And when they email me, I get inundated by 100 students, so I get a lot of emails. but it is somehow participation, right? Office hours, that's participation. It does count. It does show engagement. So I do welcome those things, even if it's mechanical. Sometimes they'll ask a mechanical, like, oh, I don't see a midterm. We don't have a midterm. I say, yes, we don't have a midterm, but I'll see the emotional need there to connect with the professor. Even though it's a trivial question they ask on syllabus, there's some emotional thing they need there to be communicated. So I share also participation grades early. So within the first 5 weeks, I already gave some participation grades. And then the people who got 40 out of 100, I don't give 0 because 0 really lowers their percentage. Like if it's an F, I give 40 out of 100. Basically, they become more active. And the quizzes also motivate them, to keep up with their reading. The recordings, we were told to pretty much record our lessons. So I do the recording after class just to respect people's privacy. And then that actually works pretty well because people who miss class, usually when we are face-to-face, they don't have that. But thanks to the recording, which we can post on Blackboard, suddenly people who weren't there or have difficulty, English is not their first language, they suddenly are better served than ever before. And people miss class, they really can listen to the recording and benefit from what's happened. And during the recording, I'll mention what's happened during class. So I'll say, well, this group, that group, they said X, Y, and Z, so they have a feeling for what happened in class. And then I save the chat and I put it on Blackboard with the course, like we have like course syllabus documents, course documents. So before I leave Zoom, I highlight the text, copy it into some document, and then parse it out. It gets very crunchy, so I have to hit return after each chat interaction to create a bigger document that doesn't all collapse, and put it on Blackboard. And that's kind of useful for my students, I think. Creates some discussion. And lastly, like all of that is like starting back in the fall of 2011 when we had online teaching 101. I don't know if people remember the Zicklin instructional teaching fellows back then, Fajardo and Hildebrand, and they did a good job like teaching us about online teaching. Then I got other opportunities to teach online through the department, and then all the activities through the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Active Learning Seminar, and then the faculty seminar and remote communication through the Schwartz Communications. All that really helped inform our teaching. So I want to thank all the effort in the backdrop that makes the teaching possible. Yeah. So I'll stop sharing the screen. And
thank you so much, Amitai. So next up is Hogan also from marketing. Yes.
Actually what's kind of fun here is that, Amitai, you mentioned before that was similar themes we're all using. So, particularly folks who are from business, I think most are from a business background, that the commonality I have with you is you have to put the risk reward in the right place to get the student engagement. So I'll start with that. Now I'm going to be going back and forth a lot here because this is kind of like, I'm sorry, so you'll see my face, but nonetheless, we can kind of be more alive with each other. Okay, so, my Hogan is the pronunciation of my name. My father gave it to me. I was born here. So it's been something which is a fairly unique thing in my life. And, I do respond to a variety of how it's pronounced. So calling me Hogan is perfectly fine. Anyway, I'm 33 years from business. I retired about 5 years ago, and I just started my 5th year of teaching at Baruch. I'm a Baruch alumni, vintage 1979. Now, that being said, I teach a marketing strategy course, 5750. It's a capstone course. Just this semester, I've taught international marketing. And what you'll see here is kind of what works for me. Now, nonetheless, I am benefited from the fact that most of my students, actually almost all my students are seniors. they're ready for a career. So I'm at this point of, I do need to push them and to kind of treat them like professionals. That being said, most act like seniors, but not all. But anyhow, that's just part of the routine. Okay, so for student engagement in my course, it's really about clear expectations to set that that piece up. So it's no different like negotiations, where the negotiations, the real prep is not in the negotiations table. It's really outside of negotiations. So this is really no different. It's clear expectations. It is in the syllabus. I talk about the benefits, the risk reward, and student ownership. Now that being said, okay, I'll just touch on this real fast here. On clear expectation, when it comes to benefits, I cite to them, it's a top skill that's preferred by, on a survey by more than 1,000 corporate employees, that communicating with strategic thinking is a top preferred skill. It's also the most difficult one to get. Now on risk reward, I do talk about, and that's really where it comes in right there. And I'm going to stop sharing here because it's really on the photo, that is, the risk reward, half of their grade is tied to class participation. And it's going to be active learning. It's going to be Socratic mode. I'm there to really facilitate the dialogue. And the key piece is also going to be in the rubric. And you'll see one example of my rubric. It's really about the basis of communicating with strategic thinking. You have a framework, a structure, then you have analysis, you have a conclusion, and then you can connect to strategy options. Student ownership, as you'll see me walk through some examples here, the key is to get them to own their comment. They have to, so you kind of get it from my quote, they have to talk, and it's verbal. They got to talk. On the rubric, one of the more important things to touch on is the heart of it is right here. And that's the whole thing of getting them prepared. And it's hard. It's really one of the toughest things that gets students to do, that they're ready for the class. They've done the advanced prep. They're quick and ready with a comment, and they have analysis. Once they have analysis, how do they move it along? Do they have a conclusion? And then ultimately, how do they connect to strategic options, which clears them into this A range here? By the way, if I cold call somebody and they're not ready, I mean, it is an automatic C- for that day, okay? Okay, the first half of the class, of the course, is really spent on learning frameworks, learning how to use them, coming up with analysis. And when I say analysis, this is not calculus analysis. As I would always tell, if you have two numbers, you can do basic analysis and get your point home coming from your critical thinking. And once you have that, then come to a conclusion. That's the key part of getting them into that mode, and that's the toughest part. And quite frankly, even executive MBAs have that difficulty. But once they get there, it's new learning. They get the neuropath. The neuropath does develop. Then they're ready, and then there's a breakthrough. Okay, and then doing the connection to strategy is actually the easiest part. I'm going to move right along here. Now, what I also find is what helps, and this is the good part with Zoom, rather than me getting to class 15 minutes ahead of time and write stuff on the whiteboard here, this is at least, it's ready, it's locked, it's ready to go. And I give these formats to students up front so that they know that, yeah, we have a framework, and on the right side, it's going to be how you connect to the respective strategies. Bear with me here. So, yeah. So with that, all of this is really to encourage their ownership. They own it. When we start the class, it starts with really okay, who would like to open the class? And how do we follow on and keep that going? Now, so brace yourself. This is going to look kind of sloppy, and it is. But notice what I try to do here is really to encourage further along their ownership. It's not so much the perfect handwriting, and if I'm ever had to do perfect handwriting, I am in deep trouble here. But what happens with the class is they all know this. You know, Josh would say something, I'm hitting all the key points, and then there's analysis and how does it connect the dots. So this is really done to, you know, it doesn't happen right away. They catch on to it, okay? And by the way, something I didn't mention before, which is their participation grade ties to preferably how they consistently finish in the course, not how they start. So if a student that was too shy, they didn't get in initially, they got a C- because they got cold call, well, I'll forget all about that if they demonstrate consistent commitment, which means they participate roughly 60% out of the class. Then what I tell them is, now I have enough data points to evaluate you. Now I can see how you consistently finish, and I'll ignore the start. I'll look at how they finish. So it's really more of a journey, and it's a journey of ownership. Now, if they don't have that level of participation, then it is what it is, and it's crystal clear in the syllabus, which is I now need to look at the beginning. Immediate feedback is quite important. So pretty much within a couple of hours after the class, there's key factoids that they know. And I send something out where it's a student ID number so that it's a little bit more opaque about it. But they get to the issue of how this connects back to the rubric. This student on the top, fantastic comment here. They did the strategy connection. They have a takeaway. They have analysis. And they guess what? This student has, this one has only participated 63% of the time of the classes. And that's done so that they know their metric, they know what they need to do to get there. They know that they have to increase participation if they want to get the benefits of the evaluation toward the end of the course. So that's all laid out. And once again, it's something of consistently reinforcing it. So I'm just going to end with the final slide here. And I'll just get back to, it's really heavy, clear expectations. What are the benefits? Put the right risk reward and have student ownership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hogan, for your presentation. And last but not least, we have Cathy Kawalek from the Management Department. As many of you know, Cathy is also known as the Zoom Wizard of Baruch. So welcome, Cathy.
I said I wasn't going to use slides, and I am. So yes, I've met most of you. So hello again to many of you who have met me through my good Zooming class, right? But today I think we'll talk a little bit about what that means for good teaching. And I think that one of these, if you've been to any of my classes, I do use this, and it's given where we are and given how many of us did not maybe choose this environment for teaching. I love this quote from Jimmy Buffett, that changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. If we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane. And I think that, you know, overall, I have been, if you've attended my course, you will know that even with my students, no matter if they're you, the adults, or the students who are in Baruch, I would say that I think sense of humor is what I try to keep up in terms of what is the basis of a culture in a class for engagement. Because I think in this environment, if we're not all smiling, and the uptake of any information that you provide may or may not be there. So I've learned this. I've had students who have become ill, students who have become frightened, students who have lost people in their households. So for me, and driving most of my engagement and underlying this has been, how do we keep a sense of humor, almost in the Greek sense, what is, in the theatrics, what is it that we have to do in order to keep that sense of humor? So if you're not in my class, this is one of the first slides that I show, that working from home isn't easy, but it probably looks like this for a lot of our students. I just used a polling feature as I closed out my teaching yesterday and today, and I found out that when I queried on what were the biggest hurdles, their hurdles were actually not having quiet time, not being able to be in the library and catch up with concentration, constantly being interrupted by their families or by bad internet, as was mentioned. So, recognizing this and sharing it, I think was and has been the most important things. As I said, if you were in my class, what percentage of class noticed I was still in my pajamas and also drinking wine? I think having that humanity behind all of this continues to be, I think, the critical point in engagement and getting them to talk. Certainly, as you're dealing with the students that we are, it's a different world. There are many challenges. As we said, we may consider them distractions. Some people consider it multitasking in a business environment. And so I think that when we're really looking at, what is it, the environment that we're really working with? How has that changed from being in those four walls? And we had a good laugh yesterday upon closing about all the kerfuffle about, I don't know if I've liked my online class, but then they just realized that they didn't have to schlep through the snow, didn't have to get on the subway, didn't have to fit 45 people in a room that holds, should hold 20. Suddenly I thought, maybe those breakout rooms were a lot better as I was doing them virtually. So, I think that we have to consider all the different things that are happening and the whole culture that we create in that surrounding in the class. So I think one of the key things you do have to ask yourself in this environment is that, what is your teaching style? We all have a learning style for sure, but what is our teaching style? Examining that very carefully. What is meaningful for you may not be meaningful for your audience of students. And I know that in some cases that may be anathema to kind of consider that when you have objectives and you need to get to end of game. But it's also, I think, critical because not all students respond in every different type of environment. And as you know, maybe in the classroom, you do have that opportunity. Online, you have it too, but it takes a little bit of a challenge. Even as we were starting this meeting, everybody kind of commented that I can't see your name. One of the hacks that I tell you is that how do you continue to see the name of the student? And so in an online environment, you actually know who's talking and who's not because the name is on the box. If you're like me and getting a little older, you may not always remember who that student was. So there are some certain advantages as we're going forward in your recognition of the engagement of the student who is participating. I think it's very important for the visual. So if we're considering humor, I think we also have to look visually at how we're communicating and what we're communicating. Way back in high school, I had a nun who was very fond of the fact that always leave a little white space. And by that she meant leave room inside of you so that you can always understand from where the other person's coming from. I think that's also true in leaving the white space when you're perceiving what is on the screen. They may not always be looking at your face, but they will be looking at the screen. And when we say about different learning styles or appreciation of that, certainly responding visually, even though that might not be your style, it might not be your backup style. But I have another good mentor, a guy who's written a really great book on visual teaching. And always important to remember, I think, some of those things, because you don't know which students might not be attracted to a spreadsheet, but the minute they see the color on the screen, the minute they see different ideas that pop in different ways, they become hooked into what you're saying. So I think another thing is to remember is that, content planning, less is more. I actually show this to my students as well as I show it to you in the Zoom class. And managing how much content you're actually delivering and being quite honest with yourself in terms of what is your takeaway? What do you expect them to go home with today? One of the things I learned along the way is that, when we talk about getting students to team or come together, and as you know, if you've been in my class and you experience a breakout room, you're not quite sure why you felt better. And I found this out of Lady Montague back in the 18th century. She actually had the architect weave this carpet so that she would have a main session in the middle with the main circle. The other circles represent secondary conversations in her salon. So guys, this is nothing new. We've been trying to break out, I think, get that rational thinking and work better together as teams for a very long time since the Enlightenment. And I think the other thing is the setting of the expectations. I think various people have touched upon this as we move forward. And that is that, how are you setting expectations for how people are going to perform together? One of the things one of the reasons why, Allison and I talked in March and I came on to teach Zoom is that I had worked in a remote environment for over 15 years. It never occurred to me that we couldn't communicate and achieve our goals coming together in a remote environment because I had always worked in that and I never saw anybody's face. We had an ongoing joke at IBM that when we actually did get in the room together, we would cover our eyes and listen to the voices, because then we knew who that person was because we never saw their face before. So it was very, very interesting. And I think setting those expectations with your students too has been an important point. So when we talk about breakout rooms, and I think this was touched on before, what in the assignment du jour, what is it you are going to discuss? What are going to be the questions that I want you to contemplate here? What do you want to come back and talk to us about in terms of what you're pursuing? And I give each of my teams a company. I would say that I really have liked to continue to use this BPL. We walked away from company analysis, but I do feel that it brought continuity to the class because I could use each of these sessions to reiterate what my key takeaway was for that class. So I think that the understructure of any type of classroom engagement really has to do with a lot of pre-work, as we've said, as everyone has already said here, really aiming for that dynamic participation, using the humor, using the visual in order to engage them into the environment, and communicate and communicate and communicate. You need to do it so many times. So if I did mention, I teach, strategic planning in the BPL in the capstone. I also teach in other places strategic marketing. And I've learned, I think, over this transition, because it is a little different than if we were just teaching an online class and we're not in this COVID environment, is that attitude is everything. Bringing positive attitude. I realized that after I did some analysis on it, that I was actually teaching my class as if I were managing teams, bringing them to the conclusion or the end of game that I really anticipated that they would have. So I think I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy, and thank you so much, all of the presenters. So now we'll open it up to Q&A. And there are some questions already on here, a couple questions, but I do want to start more broadly before we get to those questions by asking the presenters, this might be a little optimistic of me, but given that we hopefully will at some point go back to in-person classes, we've talked a lot about what you bring from in-person classes to the online shift, but have you all thought about what you're going to take from the online version of your classes now that you've done it times and bring it back to in-person?
I can,
Suzanne, go ahead.
Yeah, I can say something like, I love the idea of chat where the comments are somehow documented and shared. So that's very helpful. So people can see a log of the class. Also the recordings, I think, really helpful for people. And so while we want people to show up in class, Some people can't, won't, are absent due to a flu, whatever is happening with their lives. The recordings are easy to do and very helpful.
Suzanne, go ahead.
I think I'm going to bring a bit more into the classroom of a team-based discussion. I did a little bit of that in face-to-face classes, but I think I'm going to activate that component a bit more.
And I may not go back to the classroom. I have to tell you that if you know me and you know how I grabbed for this right before, I may find that, just for my physical health, I may stay online because I found that both for my planning and for my ability to communicate. Now, I will grant you, I miss, I miss like everybody else, the camaraderie. But I think that it's almost as if I've been more engaged. I don't miss driving and parking and walking the 3 blocks. That's really, I don't know, call it old age, but I'm starting to add up the hours on how I spend them. And if I could read 3 more interesting articles instead of drive in, that might be a positive. So, but to answer, the question, I did use breakout rooms before. I think that probably what it really did do was how I planned in Blackboard and how I communicated. And I think going to a module teaching, that's probably something I will keep that will be visible to the student, because it required that I just put in much more discipline in terms of how my class read in Blackboard and what they were to expect. So I think keeping those expectations clearer will probably be what I take forward.
This is Hogan. One of the benefits of Zoom, which I still haven't figured out how I will solve for that when I go back to face-to-face, is in Zoom when I say, okay, who would like to start? The hands go up, and I know the exact order of who's trying to get in. Whereas if it's face-to-face, when the hands go up, it's really easy to kind of lose track of who was on first or whatever. So that's an element where I don't know what the real answer is, but it's something where I'm going to spend a little time to figure out how do I get some insight, in terms of where I position myself in the room to kind of get a good panning to appreciate, the order of the students being interested to talk.
Thank you. Do other folks have questions? There's a question in the chat. I think this is for Suzanne. How do you make sure to engage in discussion on Blackboard? How do students engage in discussion?
I really keep track of who is interacting and what the issues are. I really pay good attention to who is, how active they are and what components of the class. And if I find that some students are lagging in some areas, for instance, active participation in the online environment, I will be in touch with them about that, and we will discuss it. So I make sure that they understand that I know who is active in what areas of the class.
So other questions? Folks can feel free to unmute and speak up as well. I did hear this theme of transparency come up in many of the presentations, in showing students what you see them doing, right? I think that's so interesting and important. Do you all think that happened only because you shifted online, or were you doing that before? Did being online help with that? And general impressions about how that transparency is working.
Hamad, I don't know if I understand the question entirely. Are you saying them being engaged when you can't maybe visually see them?
Or showing them that see that they are engaged, right? So the students understanding that my professor knows that I'm part of this class, knows that I'm participating, knows that I'm doing the things that I think that I'm. And so showing that back to them. So that's what I mean by transparency.
Well, I know that for, from my standpoint, I have been, one of the things like I said, remaining with online teaching, what it's given me is that I really know, I make full use of that participants box. I get them to vote. What do you think of that idea? If I have nothing, I say, well, then we're going to go to a vote. Those missing 10 who went to Starbucks to go get coffee are obvious at that point. But you know what? I want to remind you guys this kind of idea that that you had control before is really kind of funny, guys. If you were teaching a jumbo class, they were up there with their laptops ordering their shoes from Zappos. I think there's some reality we have to set into this. And we've all done it. We all do this. We've got all the phones, everything else going on. We've got ongoing chat boxes that we can go private. We've got Slack on our phones. I don't have to be 100% here, right? So I think that what it should be questioning is how much you really knew about what was going on before. Yeah. Get honest with yourselves, and give it up. I think that when you talked about ownership of learning continues to be part of their lives. They're the ones paying. If they decide, listen, we've all done it. If you buy the steak and you don't freeze it, it's gone, right? That's it. You wasted it. So it's more or less, even if they are buying a product and they feel that somehow you're supposed to be delivering it to them, on the other hand, they're supposed to be participating to learn the knowledge. You can't, you remember how your grammar school teacher said, I can't rip open your head and pour it in. It is what it is in terms of how are they going to own what that knowledge is. So I think that we can present as well we can, and they have to meet us more than 50%. It's 75% for them to come up and really take advantage of what we've offered.
Yeah. This is Hogan. I'll comment on the transparency. I'll extend on that. It's you be as transparent as possible. Give them the feedback. I had a debrief with my class leads in the last day of class, and they were telling me that, I give them the feedback in terms of how they did on their comment and all. But now this sort of cuts both ways, right? There's one of them that would say, when the email came to them, and then there's that file, and they kind of hesitate to want to open it to see how they did. But nonetheless, as they mature and grow, like as in business, I look at this whole thing in many regards. A syllabus to me is like a variable comp program. Okay, they know what they get rewarded for. They know what they don't get rewarded for if they don't do X. So that therefore, like what Catherine's talking about, I tell them I treat them as professional. It's up to you. I'm not going to drag you in to make you learn. But if you're here to learn, I'm here to help you to learn. But be transparent, and even to the point where, but also understand that there could be a little panic with that if they get the feedback. But it's good for them. It's so long as you reinforce that consistently. I would always be on that side of the equation.
It strikes me, thank you for these presentations. They're so interesting. And listening to all of you, it strikes me that a real benefit of moving online, something we've learned, is all the many different ways that we can encourage and invite participation in our classes. So we've got the chat and the polling and the raise hand feature, and even, an option to participate after class via reading the archived chat or watching the recorded class. So I would love to hear anyone of you talk more about what really worked out of these, and breakout rooms, I forgot to mention, what really worked, you feel, out of these different modes that we now have for participation. It's really forcing, I think, us as teachers to rethink what it means to participate and be present in class. So what's really worked, and how are you planning on switching things up or capitalizing even more on what works, and what might you start downplaying because it wasn't as valuable in your classes?
One of the things that I found most effective, and it was a bit of a surprise, but these students have, of course, the workplace is so much a team-based environment, that they have learned to work very effectively as team members in a very democratic model. I do talk to them about natural leadership, and we talk about, there are many, many, many workshops in the world about how to be a great team leader, but there's very little instruction on how to be an effective team member. What are the dynamics? How do you exercise those dynamics? And how do you take control of your team, every one of you, taking control of your team to maximize your outcome? And that has been one of the most gratifying outcomes of the class environment throughout the semester.
This is Hogan. I'll just answer Cheryl's question also. And I stumbled upon this toward the end of the course, the last two classes. To the extent, if I show a PowerPoint and that's all they see for 60 minutes, it kind of encourages the behavior. They're going to check out. But what I found, and I stumbled upon it, was, okay, if I break out the PowerPoint into photos, go one at a time, and go back and forth, and I see they see me talking. The great benefit I got of this, and I have to figure out how to do more of this, is that last class I had, all of a sudden, this thing that I cherish a lot. It's called peer-to-peer discussion. That started showing up. And I was like, I'm stepping back at that point and say, this is way cool. That's the best form of learning. They learn from each other. So anyway, I haven't figured it all out, but that's something I'm going to, kind of find a way to replicate in the next semester.
I'm going to share my screen, because to the point that Suzanne was making, and I think, Suzanne, you and I even talked about this when we were sitting next to each other in the thing, about the lack of, what is it to be a good team member? And so I'm going to share with you something that I found, and I think I found an opportunity for someone who hasn't published, who's completing their PhD, because Suzanne is absolutely right. There's very little literature on what it takes to be a good team player. So part of my first, and by the way, when I went to online, I stopped using the word lecture and I started using the word briefing. So our first briefing is about the technical aspects of the class, or the management of the class itself. And this is one of the slides that I bring up, because I want them to know that there are 4 C's that I have an expectation of in terms of a commitment, contribution, communication, and cooperation. And that this is essentially the evaluation that they will receive in terms of their team participation in things that are going on. So, I just wanted to reaffirm that point that Suzanne is talking about. You do have to, I think, stop and reiterate that in terms of your expectation, transparency, whatever you want to call it. In terms of what worked or what didn't, here's an interesting thing. I did a polling at the end of class yesterday, and what I thought was fascinating is that they didn't zero in on the fact that most of their accomplishments had been done in the breakout room. They didn't choose that as the way that they had learned. But the other things that they did choose were things that happened in the breakout room. So I think that that's a good thing. They didn't, it wasn't the method, it was the content. And so maybe that was a good thing that happened as an outcome of it. What doesn't work is asking for feedback and not having an ability to click, pick up the mouse, somehow interact with the computer. And especially, depending on the time of day, I'm teaching some students at the 6 a.m. hour in their country. You're not going to get a lot, guys, until the coffee comes in. But I did have to use if I asked a question, I had to ask for a response that was not verbal first. Then by triggering that, I could go and say, so tell me, Tamara, why did you feel that way? Then I had the leverage to be able to trigger a specific comment because I saw how they voted or they weren't there. So, you know, I would say that just to ask a general question for let's just talk about this didn't work.
And I just wanted to say thank you to all of our presenters, to Cathy, Hogan, Suzanne, Amitai, wonderful. You can use the clap. Yes, please use engagement clap emoji. And thank you also to Tamara for helping with the technical aspects of this session. And a big, big thank you for the series to Cheryl and Alfred Waller, Cheryl Smith and Alfred Waller. They organized this over 2 days. Took a lot more work before then too. And it was really greatly organized and amazing. So thank you for that. And also big thank you to Alison Lair Samuels for leading the CTL and making this all happen.